Okay, so last time when we meet and greet the exegete, we started off with Rashi, and sort of the overarching question that we had been addressing was: can anyone determine what the Torah actually says? And Rashi believed that the Torah says a lot of different things. At least I should say more precisely, the rabbis say that the Torah says a lot of things, and all of those are fully acceptable and they're great. But Rashi felt, my objective is not to just tell you everything that the rabbis say. My objective is to give you things the rabbis say, but that are within a specific framework, that are fit into a specific box that he called the pshat. So what we're going to look at right now is the position of Rashbam. And the sort of the overarching question at the top is the Torah, the source of the Torah's laws. We're going to see is an interesting facet of Rashbam's general approach to the Torah. So again, like I did with Rashi, I have the top in italics is just from Bar-Ilan software, just a basic biographical background of who the Rashbam was. Rashbam was Rashi's grandson. His father, Meir, was Rashi's son-in-law. He wrote a lot on the Torah, wrote a lot on the Talmud. So despite what we're going to read about things that he says, he is definitely in the camp of like a traditional Torah-observant, Jewish law-observant individual. He wrote on the Talmud, thought there was value in the Talmud, thought there was value to the rabbinic interpretations of the Talmud. And all of that is going to be important because we're going to see that in some ways he says the Talmud is nice, but not when it comes to the Torah. So I want to we can just jump right in. Like his grandfather Rashi, he never actually gives a formal introduction where he says, before I write my commentary, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to try to do. He doesn't write that, but what he does write, in the very opening of the Torah, he's going to sort of give you a heads up into what he's going to be doing. And so we can start with the first source here, which is Rashbam's comment to the first words of the Torah. And he's going to tell you a little bit about what he's planning on doing in his commentary. And we're going to look at several different sources and sort of piece together what Rashbam is trying to do in his comments to the Torah. So can someone read for us in Hebrew or in English source number 1, which is Rashbam's commentary to the first words of the Torah. In the beginning, God created. Here's what Rashbam has to say. Source number 1. Someone read that?
Well, I can read it, but before I do, can I ask a quick question about the biographical sketch?
Yeah. I'll just tell you that the biographical sketch on top was copy and pasted from the Bar-Ilan Responsa project.
So then you may not know the answer to this. I'm just curious when it says only some of which have been printed in the last sentence. Does that mean that there are others that exist, but they're in manuscript form and they've never been published? Or does it mean they're not extant? We don't even know, like we know he wrote them, but they're lost to time.
I don't know. I will say that in some cases, the quote-unquote Rashi on the Talmud is actually Rashbam's, and those I know are printed in several different Masechtot of the Talmud. It could be that what they're saying here is that we assume that if he wrote on some volumes of the Talmud, then he wrote on other ones as well, but we don't have them in print. I don't know what it is. We could contact, there are definitely scholars of Rashbam who we can find out. I don't know, I'm sorry.
All right, I'll read the English here. So the enlightened will understand that all of the words of our rabbis and their derivations are true and good. This is what is stated in Tractate Shabbat. I was 18 years old, but I did not know the verse. The essential laws and derivations are based on extraneous verses or variations in the syntax. The simple meaning of the text has been written in a language which lends itself to be founded in this text. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. The Himaram is understood by the sages to teach the Avraham based on the wordiness of the text, since that word is superfluous. Now, I will explain the commentaries of the early authorities first to let people know why as they did.
Meaning, so he's saying that he starts out in his commentary that there is a pshat. There is such a thing that is the actual meaning of the text. When he says, he quotes from the Talmud in Tractate Shabbat, I was 18 years old, but I did not know that the verse never loses its simple meaning. Meaning, apparently there was someone walking around in Talmudic times. I don't remember who he's quoting here, but there was some Talmudist, a Mora probably, who was walking around, who said, I never realized there was such a thing as the pshat until I was 18 years old. I never realized that there was something called the basic meaning of the text. All I knew were the rabbinic interpretations. But what Rashbam is pointing out is that there are two things. There's rabbinic interpretations, and then there's also the basic meaning of the text. And he points out here, and he gives an example that when the Torah is telling you, okay, fine. So we'll take a look at this from what Mark posted about Shmuel ben Meir. So we'll see that after. I don't know if did it say anything about when the Talmud his comments?
He wrote he looks like he filled out Rashi's commentary on a couple of tractates.
Right. So that's So I don't know about. So sorry, Michael. I don't have a good answer to your question.
I'm sorry, just sending that for Michael.
Yeah. Okay. So Rashbam gives an example in this when he says, look, the rabbis, the Torah uses the word Behi Baram. He says, this is the story of the creation of the world when God created them, Behi Baram. And Rashbam notes that the rabbis of the Talmud say, why is that word Behi Baram there? It seems totally extraneous. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't advance the text anyway. So Rashbam says that's an example where the rabbis say, oh, this is something. But Rashbam will say, yeah, but we know that that's not really what the text is saying. That's just a homiletic sort of explanation of the text, but we know that that's not really why it's there. And so this is this is just his opening to the Torah, where he's highlighting, and we're going to get some really good, strong, concrete examples of this. This is the first thing at the very outset that he says. He opens up by saying, look, you have to know that the words of the rabbis and their derivations are true and genuine. And of course, we can have a conversation, what does true mean? Bart doesn't have it. Hold on a sec. Did you not get it in the Word doc? You don't have the new Zoom? Okay, so let me see if I can. I'm gonna email it to you. That'll be faster. Okay. Sorry for this technical difficulties. Okay. All right, I just emailed it to you, Bart. Okay. So Rashbam is saying here, and at the outset, at the beginning of the Torah, he's saying, enlightened will understand that all the words of the rabbis and their derivations are true and genuine, that there is truth and value and legitimacy to everything the rabbis are going to say. But he's saying, still, there is the simple interpretation of the text. And he's saying there are multiple things going on. There's what the rabbis say, which is true and genuine. But there's also what the Torah says. There's what the pshat is. He thinks that those operate in two different spheres. We'll continue. He's going to say this more strongly in the second source, in the comment that he has to later on in the book of Genesis. He says the same type of thing. Probably more strongly than he did at the beginning of the Torah.
I have a question that I was wondering this last time when we were talking about Rashi also. So when you're talking about the true meaning of the words, I was wondering how that we understand that all this overlaps with the Masoretic tradition. And I think the earliest extant Masoretic thing is later than Rashi, right? But or not. But are we supposed to assume that Rashi and all these guys were following what the Masoretes wrote down when they're talking about some of these ambiguities and?
Yeah, we're assuming that they have in front of them the Masoretic text as we have it. There's a worthwhile conversation when Rashi makes a comment that seems that he's looking at a text that's not what we understand to be the Masoretic text. But for the most part, we're assuming that the text that they have is the text that we have. And the question is not one about, are we looking at the same text? The question is about, how do we understand the text that's in front of us?
The Masoretic text.
I'm sorry?
How do we understand what?
Right. How do we understand the words? We're going to agree that we're all looking at the same text. The question is, what does the text mean? And Rashi and Rashbam, the conversation that they're going to have is going to be about what the text means, not so much about how it should read. And what I mean is like what the letters should be. I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense, but they're not. We're comfortable. We're assuming, and it's accepted that they're looking at the same text we're looking at. And the only question is, what do these words actually mean? But not a question of, so there will be every once in a while, you'll have a comment of Rashi that'll look like Rashi makes a comment about a specific yud in the text that we don't have in front of us. And so there are volumes of articles and books dedicated to, did Rashi have a different Torah scroll? Were the words that Rashi had in front of him different from ours? But those are exceptional cases. And at least for what we're going to focus on right now, we're not going to be concerned with those specific cases, which are fascinating and merit their own classes in and of themselves. But for right now, we're going to assume that the text that they have is identical to the text that we have, and it's only a matter of interpretation. But it's a good question, and there's a lot behind it in the study of exegesis, because that's a question that will come up. But it's not going to be coming up here.
Congratulations, dear. Sorry, I'm doing the thing with Rob Jared right now. No, it's okay. I'm on mute.
No, you're not.
You're not.
Oh, I'm not on mute. I knew that was going to happen.
It's okay. Okay. Someone want to read for us source number 2, where Rashbam's going to say what he said in the first point, but he's going to make it a little stronger and a little more fully stated.
Jared?
Yes.
Can I just ask, why is it, to me, it seems like the first example seems like not a particularly good one. It doesn't seem like Hibar Am is necessarily superfluous.
Yeah, so that's why I'm giving you the second source, because I felt the first source is because that's the first place that he says it. This is the very first thing he says in the Torah. But I think the second source and the further sources we're going to have are going to be much more forceful proofs. But you're right. I think it's not as strongly stated in the beginning of the Torah as he states it, I think, really in the second source. So with that, I'm going to volunteer you to read the second source for us.
Sure. ישכילו ויבינו אוהבי שכל מה שלימדונו רבותינו כי אין מקרא יוצא מידי פשוטו. אף כי עיקרה של תורה בת ללמדנו ולהודיענו ברמיזת הפשט, ההגדות וההלכות והדינין על ידי אריכות הלשון ועל ידי 32 מידות של רבי אליעזר בנו של רב יוסי הגלילי ועל ידי 13 מידות של רבי ישמעאל. The lovers of enlightenment may understand and be enlightened by what the rabbis have taught us, namely that, quote, no verse loses its simple meaning. This is true even though the essence of the Torah comes to teach us and to edify us with lore, law, and legislation, by way of allusions in the simple meaning and the verbosity of the text, as well as the 32 hermeneutical principles of Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Yosei, the Galilean, and the 13 principles of Rabbi Yishmael.
Right, so here he said basically what he said above also, which is that the rabbis themselves admit no verse loses its simple meaning, meaning the Torah has a pshat. The Torah has a meaning that's on the surface. There's a straightforward, simple meaning to the text. And that's true even though the essence of the Torah is giving us the laws and lore and legislation with all these allusions and all these extraneous parts of the text. All of that exists, but that doesn't take away from the simple meaning of the text. So keep going.
והראשונים מתוך חסידותם נתעסקו לטעות אחרי הדרשות שהן עיקר, ומתוך כך לא הורגלו בעומק פשוטו של מקרא. The earlier authorities, due to their piety, dealt with derivations from the text, which are the essence. Because of this, they were unaccustomed to the simple meaning of the text. Right,
he's saying that, look, my predecessors were, because they were very pious and very focused on rabbinic interpretations, they spent a lot of time on rabbinic interpretations. Like his grandfather Rashi and people who came before him, they spent a lot of time and were very happy dwelling on rabbinic interpretations derived from the text and maybe departing from the text in many ways, that they're totally good for that. And because of that, they weren't so accustomed to actually reading the text and paying attention to what the text actually says. They were so used to talking about rabbinic interpretations that were overlaid on the text that they never bothered to actually look at what the text itself says. And now you can finish this one up.
I was going to say that the one other word that's left out in the translation is omek pshuto, the profundity or the depth of the simple meaning of the text.
Right, which I think, yes, thank you. it's saying that there's something there's significantly deeper in the text. Yeah, so keep going, Mark.
וגם רבנו שלמה אבי עמי, אמי מאיר, עיני גולה שפירש תורה, נביאים וכתובים, נתן לב לפרש פשוטו של מקרא, ואף אני, שמואל בר רבי מאיר, מתנו זצ"ל, נתווכחתי עמו ולפניו, והודה לי שאילו היה לו פנאי, היה צריך לעשות פירושים אחרים לפי הפשטות,
Shatot, I think is how it's,
והמתחדשים בכל יום. Rabbeinu Shlomo, my mother's father, illuminator of the exile,
that is Rashi, who we read last week,
who explained Tanakh, took care to explain the simple meaning of the verse. And I, Shmuel, son of his son-in-law, Rabbi Meir, of blessed memory, argued with him and before him, and he conceded that had he the time, he would have written other comments according to the simple meanings which arise anew daily.
Right, so he says, look, I had a conversation with my grandfather Rashi, the holy Rashi, the big Rashi that everyone loves, and I made this point to him, and I said, look, it's really nice that you're giving all these rabbinic interpretations, but there's a surface meaning to the text. There's a simple meaning to the text. And I mean, it's hard to say, hard to know how historically accurate this is or what Rashi meant when he told his grandson, okay, yeah, you're right. I should have done something like that. I don't know if he was meaning it completely or whether he was just trying to make his grandson feel good and say, oh, sure, grandson, it's very nice that what you're doing. It's a really great idea. I don't know. But Rashbam felt very comfortable saying, I talked about this with my grandfather, and he conceded that had he been able to do it, had he more time, he would have written something different than what he did. And parenthetically, it may be that what he's suggesting is that what Rashbam ends up writing is what his grandfather would have wanted, but his grandfather didn't have time to write it. So Rashbam's commentary is the best we've got. But this Rashbam is saying, really, Rashi agrees with me that his rabbinic interpretations weren't really not really what he wanted to do. Maybe it's what he wanted to do then, but later on in life, he's like, I really didn't do justice to the simple, plain meaning of the text. And so he says to his grandson, had I the time, I would have written something closer to what you're writing. I think it's, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I was struck by the last phrase, that the simple meanings arise anew, right?
Right.
Because I think it's natural to think, for us at least, probably not for him, but it's natural for us to think that the pshat is like the original meaning, right? The plain meaning, it's what's there in the text before you come to it and start interpreting it. And then the interpretations are all generated on top of the pshat. But he seems to be saying it's the other way around, that the pshat sometimes comes later. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think, yeah. So, I mean, that's something that a lot of people sort of highlight and don't know what to make of. But so I think what you're saying is a valuable interpretation to say that it goes the other way around, that maybe, and this may fit in line with his ideology, that maybe those rabbinic interpretations are sort of like these eternal interpretations that doesn't matter when or how, but they're these eternal, important, which we're going to see he thinks is what the halacha, like whenever we have derived Jewish law from the text, that's part of this eternal thing that you can't really question. But what he's trying to do is trying to understand the surface meaning of the text. That is subject to, how Rashbam's life played out and how he looks in his own the context in which he was living and writing. That's going to impact how he thinks what the pshat is. And someone else is going to read it and they're going to say something else based on their own personal experiences or their own visions of what they think the Torah is doing. And he's saying that those, like the real intention, like the real meaty conversations don't happen with the Midrash, because the Midrash is set in stone, so to speak. The Midrash is permanent. Like that's an eternal thing that was given that we have. You can't mess with that. You can't say, okay, the rabbis say, such and such. You can't argue on that. What you can do is have a conversation about what the simple meaning of the text actually is. And I think that's what he's saying. That's where the meat and potatoes is of an argument as far as rabbinical interpretation or interpretation of the text is not about the rabbinic interpretations. Those are set and done. The question is, you and I, when we start reading the text, just to understand it and make meaning from it, not for a legal perspective, like what does this mitzvah really mean, but just to understand the text. That I think is where he thinks there can be debate. Which I think is I think that's the right point to say that the pshat is where there's really nuance and creativity. Mark, what is it that you're trying to pull up for us?
Oh, Sorry, because it's the commentary to Bereshit 37 too. I'm just wondering what the actual comment was.
It's a little bit of, yeah. So it's not even, I don't think it's really even that germane to his.
Okay, no, I was just looking because it's
it's the Yosef story.
That's why I was asking.
This is your jam. Yeah, but the comment in the Torah is not even, and it's not even relevant to he uses it as a vehicle to jump into his, but we'll come back to the Joseph story. So I'll give you what to talk about in the Joseph story, so don't worry. Right, so here again, Rashbam is presenting that we agree and we recognize and we respect the rabbinic interpretations as they were. But my job and what Rashi's job and what Rashi conceded he wished he could have done better was to forget about rabbinic interpretations and to look at the text anew, fresh, taking everything into account, but looking at it anew, and as Michael pointed out, like Pashtot Hamid Chadshot B'chol Yom, every day looking at it and deriving something new from it without regard for rabbinic interpretation, whatever it is in the past. What this means is that ultimately, Rashbam is willing to recognize there are two different things. There's the pshat of the Torah, and then there's the halacha. There's laws of the Torah and rabbinic interpretation of the Torah. And rabbinic interpretation of the Torah is great and wonderful and important, but that's not really what the Torah says. That's not the pshat of the Torah. That's not the plain meaning of the text. And so Rashbam is saying there are two different levels. You could engage in one of two. You could engage in rabbinic and legalistic interpretation of the Torah, or you could engage in a pshat conversation of the Torah. There are two different things, and Rashbam is saying, I'm aiming for the second one. I'm aiming for the pshat discussion. I'm not concerning myself with rabbinic interpretation. And that's what he's laying out. So this comes up in two different ways. It's less controversial when we're talking about narratives, where Rashbam will say there's rabbinic interpretation about a narrative, and then there's my interpretation about a narrative. But that also comes up when it comes to Jewish law, and that's going to be a little more controversial. So we'll start now with the less controversial, which is when it comes to narrative, where Rashbam will say, look, there's rabbinic interpretation about this narrative, but it doesn't really matter because this is what I think the narrative is. For instance, this is a source number, because someone read, they're quick, sources 3, 4, and 5. It's poetic, not even narrative of the Torah, but it's a poetic when Jacob is giving a blessing to his sons. So the first blessing goes to Reuven. So here's someone read for us this source number 3, which is the blessing that Jacob gives to his son Reuven. Reuven, thou art my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the superiority of dignity, the superiority of power. So Rashi here, in source number 4, notes that there's repetition here. Talks about superiority of dignity and superiority of power. And so Rashi says those are talking about two different things. Superiority of dignity, that's referring to he should have become the Kohen, he should have had the priesthood, and superiority of power means the royal rank. Okay, so Rashi, who believes that every piece of the Torah has something new, and this is very rabbinic as well, that if there's a line in the Torah, it must be teaching something new. It's teaching us additional information. So it's okay, this is not really a simple repetition. Each one is talking about something different. Yeter Se'et and Yeter Oz. So Yeter Se'et, they're not repeating. One is talking about how Reuven was fit to be the Kohen, fit to be the priest, even though he ended up not being, because the tribe of Levi ended up being the priestly class. And so you really should have been of the Kohen class, and you should have been of the royal class. But Reuven was neither. Reuven was not the priest. He did not become the kings. That was the tribes of Levi, the tribes of Judah, respectively. And so Jacob was saying, you should have had this because you were the firstborn, but alas, you're not going to be. And that's how Rashi, following the rabbinic interpretation, that's how they understand that each line is teaching something new. Rashbam, not concerned with that. He says, Dibur echad hu. This is one statement. Derech hamikrot lichpol et divreihem. It is the manner of the text to repeat itself. This is poetry. Poetry will sometimes repeat, and it'll have flowery language. It'll use very vivid imagery. It may repeat itself, but to create a feeling to the reader of it, it's poem. he says, look, it's very nice there's this rabbinic interpretation that highlights these two things that Reuven should have had but didn't end up with. He should have had the priesthood, he should have had the royalty, but he didn't end up with them. And that's how the rabbis, and that's how Rashi reads it. And Rashbam says, okay, not that big of a deal. This is poetry. This is really just one idea. You don't have to pick apart and parse every single line or every single thing. It's a poem. And so there's nothing to read into here. So that's one instance where Rashbam takes a poetic passage and says, we can throw away rabbinic interpretation. We don't have to worry about it. And this is an example of that where he says, forget it. It's one statement. It's just being linguistic. It's like a literary text. Don't worry about every line meaning something. Back in the story of Breshit with the Yosef story, he says something else where he will reject traditional rabbinic interpretation. Again, it's only a narrative passage, so it doesn't have much of a practical ramification in our daily life. But here, someone want to read for us source number 6, which is,
I have a question first. So this statement of Rashi on Genesis 49:3, does that count as a pshat interpretation or as a rabbinic interpretation?
Rashi, so I think Rashi, as we saw from last week, the only rabbinic interpretations that Rashi's going to quote are ones that he feels are sufficiently textual to merit also being a pshat comment. So I think Rashi would say it's both. It's a rabbinic interpretation, but it sits very well in the text because there is repetition here. And I didn't give it in the English translation so well, but he points out that the Hebrew word, like yeter se'et means to lift up. And we use that language when we're talking about nesiat kapayim, the raising of the hands. So Rashi thinks that it says that he had the superiority of raising, literally, not dignity, but literally he had superiority of raising. When do we raise? Oh, the priests raise their hand when they give a bracha. And I didn't quote it here in the Hebrew also, but he looks at it for the oz, for the strength. Rashi says, we have other places where the word oz in the Bible refers to the monarchy. So he thinks that textually it fits well to say that these are two areas that Reuven as the firstborn should have had superiority, but ends up not. But so I think Rashi would say that it's rabbinic, but it's also pshat. And Rashbam will say, forget about that. It's not pshat. The pshat is really just, it's a poem. And so it repeats itself, but don't read into every single line. Does that answer your question? No, not really.
I'm trying to understand. Yeah, I get. So you would say that item number 4 counts would primarily go into the emendation of pshat bucket.
As according to Rashi, the problem with the word pshat.
Right, according to Rashi, right?
Yeah. So according to, I remember when I was in Bernard Revel, so we talked about, we were taking a class on a lot of these interpretations. The problem is ultimately the definition of pshat, it varies to person in person, to every commentary, and ultimately pshat is a meaningless term because what Rashi calls pshat and what Rashbam calls pshat are different. So ultimately pshat means what I think, and drash is what you think. And so Rashi will say, yeah, this is pshat because I think it, and Rashbam will say that's not pshat. This is what I'm saying is pshat. And so it almost becomes this game and this joke to use the term pshat because everyone uses the term to mean whatever they're saying. Because everyone wants to say that what they're saying is pshat and what everyone else is saying is wrong. It's nice, but it's drash. They push it away. So Rashi will tell you completely what I'm saying is pshat. And that's pshat, totally. And Rashbam walks onto the scene and says, that's nice, but that's not really pshat. What I'm saying is pshat. So it's the problem, and I have a teacher of mine at YU who wrote a book called Pshat is Not Always So Simple. Chaim Angel, the son of Mark Angel. So he has a book, Pshat is Not Always So Simple. And he basically says that the idea of saying Pshat is the simple interpretation does it a disservice because it's not necessarily so simple. And what pshat is really varies between every person, and it really has a lot more to do with how they're looking at the text than it does to this like concept of pshat. There's no such thing as this concept of pshat that everyone's shooting for. Everyone thinks pshat is different, and so it's a little messier than we'd like. Rashi will tell you, if Rashi were sitting in the room with us right now, Rashi would very forcefully argue that what he said is pshat. And Rashbam would say, Grandpa, I love you. You're totally wrong. That's not pshat. That's the best I got.
I think it depends a lot on what the text is talking about. I mean, if it says so-and-so walked out, across the street, well, that's the shot is that someone crossed the street. And then there are people that say, oh, that means that he went into a new realm of, a different mode of thinking or something like that.
But let's say, what if I were to tell you that from archaeological studies, we determined that where that person was living, there was no such thing as a road. They didn't have streets. What if I were to prove to you that we found that it actually took place in Venice? So it said street, but it didn't mean street. It meant that he took a boat across the way. So now we can say, we have the pshat. The pshat says street, but archaeology says there were no streets. So now we have to figure out.
Not every sentence is the same. Some sentences that are complicated, even like the poetry that you quoted, the concept of that, I think, is something totally different. It's something that when you're telling a simple story and, what's on the surface is really on the surface.
So there's
admittedly, you can argue. I mean, there are exceptions for that. But
well, so I think let's use the Joseph story. Let's use this next source. Can you read for us these next sources? Because I think this is actually a worthwhile piece to have here. Source number 6.
And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelim came from Gilad with their camels bearing gum balm and laudanum, going to carry it down to Mitzrayim. Then there passed by Midianim merchants, and they drew and lifted up Yosef out of the pit and sold Yosef to the Ishmaelim for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Yosef into Mitzrayim.
Okay, so I cut out the middle verses, but I think that had I left them in, it would have made this point even stronger. So I'm going to tell you what's in the middle verses there. But we know this. This is from the Joseph and Technical Literature and Code. We know the brothers threw Joseph into the pit. They sat down to eat bread. That's where this verse picks up. They sat down. They lifted their eyes up. They looked, and behold, the company of Ishmaelim were coming from Gilad. Their camels bearing gum and gum balm and laudanum, going down to carry to Egypt. At that point, which I cut out, Judah says to his brothers, "Let's go and let's sell him. Let's go and let's sell Joseph." Okay, and then the story continues. There passed by Midianim merchants, and they drew and lifted up Joseph from the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelim for 20 pieces of silver, and brought Joseph to Mitzrayim. Right. So the way the rabbis interpret this, and the way Andrew Lloyd Webber interprets this, is that the brothers were the ones who sold Joseph. They were the ones who came up with the idea of selling Joseph. It doesn't say who. It just says the pronoun they. They drew and lifted Joseph from the pit, sold him to Ishmaelim. And what I didn't include here is the brothers themselves, when they're standing before Joseph, and when they don't realize it's Joseph, and when Joseph is the viceroy in Egypt, and Joseph is saying, "You've got to go back to Egypt. You've got to go back to you've got to go back to the land of Israel. You've got to bring your brother Benjamin." That whole scene when he's like ripping on them, tearing them to shreds. The brothers turn to one another and they say, "Oh my God, you know why this is happening to us? You know why this viceroy in Egypt is so angry at us? It's because we sold our brother down to Egypt." They themselves admit in the text that they sold Joseph down to Egypt. And so the rabbis and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it seems the brothers themselves testify, this is happening to us because we sold our brother down to Egypt. They all believe that they were the ones who sold Joseph down to Egypt. And they have in their favor rabbinic tradition, but also the brothers' own testimony that they were the ones who sold Joseph down to Egypt. And yet, Rashbam, and this is where you'll see pshat is not so simple. Rashbam here, in this seventh source, Rashbam says, while the brothers had been sitting down to consume their meal, having distanced themselves somewhat from the pit into which they had thrown Joseph in order not to be guilty of eating while spilling blood, they were waiting for the Ishmaelites whom they had seen at a distance to arrive. During this period, the Midianites coming from a different direction passed there, saw Joseph in the pit, pulled him up, and proceeded to sell him to the Ishmaelites, meaning the brothers didn't sell Joseph, it was the Midianites who sold Joseph. So now we have two different things, right? Rashbam thinks the Torah never tells us who the subject of the verb they pulled him and they sold him is. So the Torah says that the brothers came up with this idea of selling him. The Torah says the brothers themselves confess, they admit to having sold Joseph. But Rashbam's saying we have a problem though, because it doesn't say the brothers actually lifted him up. And if anything, it says that it mentions these Midianites, and it says that, quote, they sold him to the Ishmaelites. And so, as you pointed out, Charles, the pshat is not so clear. In one place, the Torah says that the brothers testify to having sold, and a verse before, the brothers come up with this idea of how they're going to sell Joseph. Yet there's this jump somewhere in the middle here, that the brothers, where the text is not clear who sold Joseph. And Rashbam will say, you know what that means? That means that the brothers didn't sell Joseph. And what does he do with the fact that the brothers testify that they did sell Joseph? You'll have to ask Rashbam, you'll have to look over there. But over here, Rashbam says it wasn't the brothers who sold him. Rashi will say it was the brothers who sold him. Why did they testify why did they confess to selling him? Because they did sell him. Why does it not identify that they sold him here? Rashi will say, well, it does. It just uses the word they. We use pronouns all the time. Oh, it says Midianites, Ishmaelites. Rashi says, yeah, he was sold a bunch of times. That's how slave trafficking goes. You sell here, he sells here, he sells there. That's how it goes, period. And so who actually sold Joseph, which we could say, well, the text tells us who sold Joseph. It's not necessarily so clear who sold Joseph, because sometimes it looks like it's the brothers, the Torah is telling us. Rashbam will say, but it's not really the brothers, because they're not identified. It's just it's an anonymous third person plural pronoun. And so sometimes it's very easy to say, this is what the pshat is, but I think this is an instance where it's really not clear what the pshat actually is. And if we were to just literally translate the text word for word, we wouldn't really arrive at the best conclusion. Because it would just be a gaping hole who sold Yosef. And so I think this is where I think there's sometimes when the pshat is very easy to identify. And we can say, well, it's obvious. But I think there are many, many times where the pshat is not as clear. And you'll have a debate here between Rashi and Rashbam, and they both have clear textual proof to back them up. And that's where this debate is. Rashi will think that it's more of a leap to say that it was the Midianites who sold Joseph, and Rashbam will think it's more of a leap to say that it was not the brothers who sold Joseph. I hope that sort of made it clear that pshat, what the text actually means, is not always so clear. These are all narratives where the risk of getting it wrong is slim to none. It's relevant for us understanding what historically happened, but that's all it gives us. All it's telling us is what happened in the past. But we can probably agree that a major function, for some maybe the exclusive function, but even for others, a major function of the Torah is to give us the mitzvot, is to give us laws. And this is where what Rashbam says becomes very controversial. For instance, will someone read for us source number 8?
Now you can say it.
Okay. And this shall serve you as a sign on your hand and as a reminder on your forehead, in order that the teaching of the Lord may be in your mouth, that with a mighty hand the Lord freed you from Egypt.
So what is this talking about? If I were to ask you, what is this talking about? Sign on your hand and on your forehead.
The tefillin.
Tefillin, right? The rabbis point to this. If this is written inside of tefillin, it's so talking about tefillin that in every pair of tefillin, this verse is there on the tefillin because it's talking about tefillin. What does Rashbam here say? Kathy, you want to finish this up? It's a short one.
According to the depth of the meaning, an exhortation that this memory should be with you permanently, as if the subject matter had literally been inscribed on your hand.
So according to Rashbam, what is this talking about? When the Torah says you should bind it on your hand, what does it mean?
I think it's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor. Should I take a black box and wrap it around my arm? What are you crazy? That's not what it says. It says it should be always on your arm. Okay, it should always be, it's as if it's written on the back of your hand. But it's not talking about getting leather straps and binding them on your arms. I have no question that Rashbam actually wore tefillin. But what's fascinating here is Rashbam is saying there is a difference between what the rabbis say, which is eternal and permanent, and that's the rabbinic interpretation. This verse tells you to put on tefillin. But there's other stuff also. The other stuff is what the Torah is actually saying. And what the Torah is actually saying is that you should always remember the mitzvot. This could be a major, major problem. Because why would people put on tefillin if that's not what the Torah is talking about? And so this is where,
It's also a major problem if you assume each verse means only one thing. But I mean, that ship sailed a long time ago, right?
We'll see. It didn't necessarily set sail a long time ago.
Okay.
We'll see. But if you're right. According to Rashbam, you're absolutely right. Rashbam will say there are multiple meanings. That's what my grandfather had said also. I'm just taking it even further to say that I'm going to say explicitly that there's a legal level and there's a pshat level, and those are different. Yeah.
It's also, I think, worth noticing that sometimes people, I think, incorrectly understand pshat to mean the literal meaning. And this is a good example of how that's not true. The literal meaning of the text is to actually wear the words on your arms. And he's saying that's not the pshat. The pshat is to live your life as if they were written on your arms, right? So he's not aiming for a literal translation of the book. He's aiming for a non-midrashic interpretation of the book.
Yeah, I remember having it. So I read A.J. Jacobs wrote this book, A Year of Living Biblically, where he decides to live the Torah, the Bible, literally. And I remember having this conversation with someone. So for a while, I didn't want to read the book. And then I decided I would read the book. I actually enjoyed it a lot. But this is something that I remember having a debate about with someone about this point, because he says he's going to live the book literally, when it's clear that there are so many things that are not intended literally, but he still read it literally, which was beyond, it's like not even pshat. It was beyond that, which I think is a very good point that you're saying, that to say that the direct definition, that's good. Here, the literal meaning is figurative, right? I think that's a really good point to make about this piece.
Rob Jared.
Thank you. Yes.
I just looked up the Rashbam. He doesn't comment on when Joseph says, "You sold me."
Or when the brothers say, interesting.
Yeah,
the brothers
no,
are the ones who say.
It's Joseph says it.
But they also say later, before that, Rashbam, right, he says, Atem machartem li Hena or something like that. But I think they say before, when he's telling them they have to go back and get Yosef, I think they say to themselves, Al asher macharnu et achinu.
Oh, okay.
I think I can look right now just so we can get that verse appropriately. I don't
think it says they sold.
You're right. They don't say it. You're right. It's Yosef's own testimony. You're right. My apologies. Thank you for pointing that out. You're right.
But Rashbam doesn't say anything about it. Is right. Yeah.
So I don't know. So that's a good question. He doesn't. Where you would want him to make the comment to try to defend his position, he says nothing. Does that mean that he thinks that you just have to sort of finagle the verse and it'll make sense? I don't know. Does he say, okay, this works against me, so I'm just not going to say anything. I'll just pretend it doesn't exist. I don't know. That's a good. But thank you for pointing that out. I was misquoting. That won't be the first time, and definitely won't be the last where I make up a pasuk. So thank you for catching the invented pasuk that I just created. Okay, so this is one instance where the pshat has no, where the pshat may actually have legal ramifications, and Rashbam is saying, no, it's okay. There's the pshat, and then there's the legal interpretation. There are other instances where you have a narrative that looks like it's narrative, but it actually has legal implications. And I wanted to start this now as a lead-in to Ibn Ezra, but we'll start with source number 10 and 11 and 12, and then source number 13 we'll hold off. We're gonna open with this, but don't read it because it's a very enjoyable read. And I mean, you can read it, but we'll read it again next week when we get into the Ibn Ezra. But we'll start for now in source number 10, 11, and 12, just to end with what Rashbam says about a narrative piece that has practical ramifications, potentially for legal matters. Someone want to read for us source number 10 and source number 11?
I can. Does anybody else want to do it, or I can do it? Should I go ahead?
Please, go ahead, Mark.
Okay. ויקרא אלוקים לאור יום ולחושך קרא לילה ויהי ערב ויבוא כיום אחד. And God called the light day and the darkness he called night, and there was evening and there was morning one day.
Here's what Rashbam says. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
And then the Rashbam says, ויהי ערב ויבוקר, אין כתיב כאן ויהי לילה ויהי יום, אלא ויהי ערב שהריב יום ראשון ושיקע האור. ויהי בוקר, בוקרו של לילה, שעלה עמוד השחר, הרי הושלם יום א' מן השישה ימים, שאמר הקדוש ברוך הוא בעשרת הדיברות, ואחר כך התחיל יום שני, ויאמר אלוקים יהי רקיע. ולא בא הכתוב לומר שהערב והבוקר יום אחד הם, כי לא הצלחנו לפרש אלא היו שישה ימים. שהבקר יום ונגמרה הלילה. הרי נגמר יום אחד והתחיל יום שני. And it was evening and it was morning. It's not written here and it was night and it was day, but rather it was evening and it was morning. The first day became evening and the sun set, and it became morning, the morning following the night, for the dawn broke. Behold, one day was completed from the sixth that Hashem spoke of in the Ten Commandments, and afterwards began the second day. God said, let there be a firmament. The second day, sorry. The text does not come to state that the evening and the morning are part of a single day, for it only needs to explain how there were 6 days, that the morning broke and the night was finished. Behold, one day was completed and another day begun.
So what is he saying here? When did the days actually change over? When did day 2 begin?
Saying at dawn.
Yeah, day 2 began at dawn. And he says again in source number 12, and it was evening, it was morning, a second day. The day inclined toward the evening, after which the second day, after which was the morning after the second day. Behold, the second day of the 6 days spoken of the Holy One and the Ten Commandments. And now the third day began that morning. Day begins in the morning, right? It's like what we would always normally think. What time did you start your day today? Oh, you said it was 6 o'clock when the sun came up. I don't know. That's when the day starts. Day 2 started in the morning. Day 3 started in the morning. Day 4 started in the morning. Day 5 started in the morning. Day 6 started in the morning. Day 7 started in the morning. So if day 7 started in the morning, what was day 7? What did God create on day 7? Shabbat. So when we keep Shabbat, we're emulating God. God rested on Friday night, or God rested on Saturday morning? He rested on Saturday morning. He was working on day 6, creating animals, creating humans. Day 7 started in the morning. So what is this business that we have? And this is where I'm going to leave us right now to lead in for Ibn Ezra. If this is true, that there's this pshat interpretation that the day started at night, that the day starts in the morning, so then what on earth are we doing when we start Shabbat on Friday? Why did I make Kiddush on Friday night? God was still creating people on Friday night. Day 7 was when Shabbat started. In the morning, Saturday morning. What are we doing Friday night? So you can see, this is a narrative passage that has legal ramifications. If you want to tell me there's 2 levels to tefillin, there's the symbolic level of tefillin where we should always do the mitzvot, we should always have them as if they're inscribed on our hands, we should know them so well, they should be so a part of us that we're always doing them. So that doesn't fly in the face of the rabbinic interpretation. That just means there's a literal, or there's the metaphoric, there's the pshat of the verse, and then there's a legal addition that, yeah, it says that and means that, but we also have this mitzvah. But in this case, with Shabbat, the pshat of the day starting on Saturday morning and the halacha of the Shabbat starting on Friday night are at complete odds with each other. That means that we start Shabbat way too early and we end Shabbat way too early. Because otherwise, what are we doing with Shabbat? Why are we keeping Shabbat as we keep it at all? If it's explicitly supposed to be a throwback to that the Lord created the heavens and earth in 6 days, and the seventh day he rested. What the heck are we doing resting too early or stopping to rest too late or too early? And so this, as a lead into Ibn Ezra, we're going to see next week, is going to go crazy at Rashbam. And he's going to say, there is no possible way that halacha, that Jewish law, cannot be what the Torah says. Because if it is not what the Torah says, then we're all messing up Shabbat every single week. And he says there is no way that can be acceptable. And we'll see next week that Ibn Ezra had all sorts of other people he was dealing with in his life that were going to encourage him to say, you need Jewish law to work in concert with the pshat in the Torah. If it doesn't, we end up with a whole bunch of theologically problematic issues, one of them being this one. Why are we keeping Shabbat so early and stopping it so early? For Rashbam, it seemed that he wasn't bothered by that. He felt that the Torah was not the origin of the Torah's laws. We have the rabbinic interpretation. Why do we keep Shabbat on Friday night? Because the rabbis say we keep Shabbat on Friday night, and that was enough for him. He was able to say, look, there's the pshat. Shabbat, the first Shabbat started on Saturday morning. And then there's the pshat that the first Saturday, there's the halacha that the first, I'm mixing myself up. There's the halacha that the Shabbat starts on Friday night. And then there's the historical reality that God rested on Saturday morning. And the fact that those aren't in agreement, okay, that's not going to change how I make Kiddush on Friday night, Rashbam says. It's not a problem. Because the Torah isn't ultimately the source of Jewish law. Rabbinic interpretation is the source of Jewish law. And so the Torah can say whatever it wants. The Torah could say that God rested on Tuesday. That's not going to change when Shabbat is. And so that's how Rashbam understood it. And that's the controversy over Rashbam.
I think there's a gap, though, between what Rashbam is saying and how you're summarizing it. He's not saying that the Torah is not the source of Jewish law. He's saying that the pshat of the Torah is not the source of Jewish law.
Fair.
He's explicitly saying that the Torah has other meanings besides the pshat, right?
Fair.
So, I mean, he's not saying God didn't rest Friday night. He's saying the pshat is that God began to rest Shabbat morning. That's all he's saying. He's not denying other interpretations.
Correct. But that's still, there are a lot of Jews who you walk around and say that the pshat is that God rested on Saturday morning, who would find that, what do you mean? Well, we keep Shabbat on Friday night because God rested.
Well,
what could that possibly be?
Do a lot of Jews think that during the first 6 days of creation, God's work continued at nighttime? I mean, day 3, God's creating, what was day 3? The plants and the habitat, right? So is the general consensus that God created for a full 24-hour period? Or did he create during the daylight hours? After all, he had started the Maaseh Bereshit by creating light and day. So do we have any reason to think that when it says he rested on the 7th day, that doesn't mean that he was working continuously for the entire 24-hour period preceding that. There's not really a problem here. Unless you want there to be one. If you want there to be a problem, there's a problem.
Right.
I know people want there to be problems. But
right.
Problem.
That's good. And that's a solid, I think that's a strong defense of the Rashbam. To say, look, there doesn't have to be a problem here. There's a problem if you want there to be a problem, but there doesn't have to be a problem here. And I think that's a strong defense of the Rashbam. And I think there are many, many Pashtanim who are applauding you right now who will say that's a solid defense of the Rashbam, and we're totally good. Case closed. Rashbam is great. And I think that's a good place for us to end because Ibn Ezra would want to punch you in the face.
Sure.
Okay. So we'll end here, and we'll start with this conversation next week. And I'll have Michael, if you're here, I'll have you read Ibn Ezra's response to Rashbam's comment, and
all right.
we'll get into Ibn Ezra next week. But thank you, Yasher Koach. Thank you everyone for coming.